Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's the author of the book The Mission Driven Life, none other than Miss Audrey Rindlisbacher. Welcome, Miss Audrey, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me. My name's Audrey Rindlisbacher. I am a mother of six and been married to my husband for 31 years. So we've been at this for a while. And this book, and we can talk more about it as we go on, but it was the fruit of a lot of years of personal struggle, trying to figure out how to put my own life together. And eventually found the 7 Laws of Life mission that I outline in the book and put the book together. And it's proven to help other people. So I'm really grateful about that.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Audrey. How do you define a mission in the context of this book, and how is it different from the more commonly used word purpose?
So, um, like I was saying, years ago, I was a mom, had a bunch of little kids, and really felt like I was drowning in motherhood. I loved my kids. I didn't want to stop being a full time mom, but I needed something for myself. And I searched for a year. And eventually, my sister in law told me about a little liberal arts school where they studied the classics, and I went on their website and I was instantly sold. And the result of starting to take these classes where I was reading all the classics was that I was introduced to lots of really incredible people who really changed the world. Clara Barton or Albert Schweitzer or um, Mother Teresa, names that many of your listeners would be familiar with. And at the same time, I was watching a lot of people make huge sacrifices all around me, and they were talking about how it was mission. And as I was reading about these great people, Gandhi or whoever it was, they were talking about this idea of mission, and how um, they had felt a call and they felt that they needed to do something to bless the world. And I just really wanted to understand it. And one of the first, there's a lot of books out there that talk about purpose, and that's wonderful. It's much better to have a purpose than not have one. But the reason that this is the mission driven life and not the purpose driven life, and the reason that I've chosen to focus, to write the book and talk about the family that and I can talk more about this in a minute, but the family that I highlight in the book, their names are the Ten Booms. They saved the lives of 800 Jews during World War II in Holland. And I use their story to talk about the 7 laws, but I had studied dozens and dozens of these men and women who I admired to find out what they had in common. And this idea of being called and having a mission kept coming up. So finally, I actually just looked it up. I actually just looked up the dictionary definitions. And it was really quite eye opening because purpose is something that, like the dictionary says, it's a meaning or a goal that we assign to ourselves, something that we think that we want to accomplish, which is, again, really wonderful because it's so much better to have goals and to be clear about where we're headed than to not have that. But mission is something that someone else assigns us. It's for the greater good of the people around us or the world at large. It's something that we feel called to because it might not be something would that we might choose all the time. It might be something that feels big and hard that we don't know if we can accomplish, but we can see how it's needed in the world, how it's going to bless people's lives. And so what these great men and women kept talking about whose lives I was studying was that they felt called and that they chose to answer that call. And by virtue of answering that call, they grew and changed and became so much more than they had been before. And the work that they did bless the world in significant ways. So that is why it's mission rather than purpose. It's because it's something higher than us, something that we submit to. I always talk about how it's submission and then mission. And we submit and we say, I'll do what I feel called to do that will make the world a better place. And when we answer that call, then it blesses us and others.
Interesting indeed, Miss Audrey. Interesting. And in a world of constant noise, distraction, and curated social media lives, why is a mission driven life the crucial antidote to feelings of emptiness and burnout?
The reason that it's the answer to feeling overwhelmed and being burned out is because we self personal ambition can only go so far. It's the reason why even people who, let's say, they build a really successful company, or they have some kind of successful career, or they have a really fulfilling marriage, but they get to a point where they still feel like they want more. It's very satisfying, it's very fulfilling for a time, but they want more. And many of these people, when they're conscientious about that, end up giving back. Like they'll start being engaged in charity work and helping people that can't help themselves. There's something about our human makeup that as we sacrifice ourselves, and that doesn't mean we don't meet our real needs, and that doesn't mean that we don't do things for ourselves that need to be done. It just means that we give of ourselves. There's a need we have to do that. It blesses us and it blesses the people around us. When we shun or ignore the real needs of other people, or we pursue only those things that we think we want and that are of interest to us, it only takes us so far, and it ends up being a bit of a dead end road because we get what we want, but then it doesn't bless anybody else. So mission is heals a lot of the burnout and stress and overwhelm, because instead of thinking about all the things that are wrong in our lives and all the reasons that we're unhappy and all the ways that we're a failure, we change our whole frame of reference and we start looking outside ourselves and asking ourselves, okay, who's worse off than me that I might be able to help? It kind of reminds me of I did a podcast recently on Catherine Marshall, and she was a really famous author in the middle of the 20th century. She wrote one of my favorite books called Christie, but she talked about how when she was a young girl, her family, her father was a pastor, and they didn't have a lot of money. And even though they didn't have a lot, her parents, especially her mother, always found a way to give. So she tithed, she took care of the poor, she made contributions in her community. And one of the things that Catherine said about that was, when you recognize that there are people that have less than you, and when you're actively working to help them, it's really hard to fall into self-pity. It's really hard to be resentful, because it helps us to be full of gratitude. And then, of course, the beautiful thing that happens when we step into mission is we not only kind of stop worrying so much about how something is going to benefit us exclusively and start worrying about how we can help others in significant ways. And so we lose ourselves and we're reminded that we have a lot, that we can do a lot, that we have a lot to give. But then, of course, there's the beautiful result of when that person's life is blessed or benefited in some way. And the satisfaction that comes from having helped someone who couldn't help themselves, that's like an irreplaceable, that is real joy. That is something that you have to earn with your actions and your sacrifices, that you can't get any other way. And so people, we're in a very, like in the West, we're very wealthy. We have our needs plus a lot of wants met. We're very comfortable, but but we're missing this deeper component of the the beauty and the outcomes that come only from service.
Miss Audrey, you talk about finding living a mission. Is a mission something we discover through introspection, or is it something we build through action and experimentation?
Oh, it's both for sure. I have a chapter in the book, chapter 5, which says hear the call. After you've lived the four foundational laws that I talk about in the first few chapters, I talk about what it means to hear the call and how you can go about hearing that. And I actually talk about those two different ways that you just mentioned. Sometimes people just know they've always wanted to do some specific thing that sounds really beautiful to do, and they find ways to bring that gift. Whether they've always wanted to be an artist or whatever, there's always a way to use what you feel called to do in a mission driven way, a way of serving others and giving to others and giving of yourself. Sometimes people have to experiment. Albert Schweitzer is a perfect example of this. When he was a young man, he decided that he would continue to pursue his education and his own personal pursuits. He was a great organist, he wrote books. He would pursue those things until he was 30. And when he was 30, he would devote himself to the direct service of humanity. But he didn't have any idea what that service would look like. And so for the next several years, he just tried things. He tried all sorts of things, anything he could think of that he might want to devote his life to. And ironically, after all of that trial and error, the answer came to him with a magazine that was set on his desk one day. He opened it up, and there was an article about how they needed doctors in Africa. And he was not a doctor. He'd not gone to medical school. He didn't have those credentials or that preparation, but he had a lot of personal introspection. He had had a lot of experiences. He had been very connected to whatever, for him it was God. You can think about whatever is the source of power and intuition for you, but a lot of prayer and introspection and experimentation led him to a clear call. He knew that that's what he needed to do, and of course he really changed the world through that work that he did, and it took him time to figure it out. So if someone out there is excited about the idea of a more mission driven life and they want to hear and answer a call, then I would just encourage them to be patient and experiment, to gain more self knowledge, try things they've never tried, and just trust that when the time is right, they'll know what they need to do.
Miss Audrey, on the practical how to and framework. For someone feeling
Mhm.
completely disconnected from any sense of mission, what is the very
Yeah,
first concrete exercise you would have them to do start their journey?
yeah. Um, I would say the most important thing that they could start to do is to work on themselves. And one of the things that I talk a lot about is that, mission is a very relationship oriented thing to do, because it's something that we do in relationship with other people. And the most important relationships that we have are our relationship with God and our relationship with ourselves. And we need to get those healthier. And lots of people in our world think of self care as self indulgence, but it's not. Self care is actually really meeting your real needs. So, what I encourage people to do is to um, get their relationship with some kind of God or supreme being into order, and to recognize that there are certain laws and principles at play in the world, and they need to get honest about the fact that they need to live those. The people who have the most success in life are actually the most obedient, and we don't think about it that way, but they actually live according to really good laws. For example, people who have the very best health are the people who take the best care of their bodies. They live the same principles that others people who have good health live. They get enough sleep. They drink a lot of water. They eat clean foods. They exercise regularly, et cetera, et cetera. And so these principles are those. They govern success in any area of life. We can live principles of business or principles of relationships. And so what I encourage people to do, especially in those first few laws of the mission driven life, and of course these are the laws that I've seen dozens and dozens of great men and women live in order to have the impact that they had, but they first have to get themselves in order. So they need to engage in good self care. They need to engage in good self leadership. There's a lot of stuff out there about the power of our thoughts and the power of our beliefs and the power of our emotions and all of those things. But we have to govern ourselves. It's really hard to be engaged in um, work that's meaningful and that's blessing people when our personal life is a bit of a wreck. So, engaging in those things that will bring greater order to them as a person and to their environment, in their home, to their personal relationships, and then a lot of self discovery. It's hard to know how to match your gifts and strengths to needs in the world if you don't have a lot of self understanding. And I get this. Like I I
Hmm.
spent 15 years in school. I had 3 years at university, and I remember still just bumping around the college, no idea what major to declare, uh, no idea what most of my gifts and talents and even interests were. I'd already taken different classes, but I just still felt so lost in my own personal knowledge. And so doing we like in the academy that I run for women, we give these women a lot of self assessments and have them go through different activities and exercises so that they can start to really have have a good conversation with themselves about what can I give in the world, what interests do I have that could potentially bless me and other people. So that's where I would encourage them to start. And the very simplest, if you whittle that all down to the first action that a person could take right this minute, I would just encourage them to ask themselves the question, what do I know is the next thing I need to do? And they'll know. We all have a conscience. If we listen to and honor that conscience, it will continue. It will speak to us more and more loudly and guide us. And I've done this, dozens of times in groups with hundreds of people, and I've asked them, do you know the next thing that you should do? When I say, what should you be doing right now? They always know, whether it's get my house in, more orderly, or make a better sleep schedule, or apologize to somebody. Take that very, very first step. And, I think people want mission to be something glamorous or easy or simple, and it's just not, because you can only give who you are. And so you need to work on yourself first, but not in a self-indulgent way, in a self-mastery way, so that you can be a greater blessing to others and experience that deep joy and fulfillment that can only be earned through giving of yourself in that way.
Indeed, Miss Audrey, totally empowering. On the challenges and mindset shift, why are
Mhm.
people often afraid to commit to a specific mission? Is it a fear of failure, of being judged, or closing the doors?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, it usually does come down to fear or a
Yeah.
sense of inadequacy, for all of us. Like, can I really do this? Do I really have what it takes? Um, can I figure it out? Will people come to my aid? And it's so interesting, the different types of callings that people have asked me about. I was on a podcast recently, and the host was asking me about, she knows a woman. She did a survey of some of her people to come up with questions for me, and one of them was that this particular woman had a really great business idea, and she knew that if she really dug deep and put in the time and built this business, that it would be successful. But she was afraid and didn't pursue it because she was convinced that she would leave her family behind and that they would suffer because of her success. Or I talked to another woman recently who has been feeling for years that she should take in foster children. She has 5 children of her own. And she said this year it just hit really hard, that it became very, very clear to her that this is really something that she needed to do. But again, she was afraid of the implications of the negative impact these kids might have on her children, or the distraction it might be to her family. She's worked really hard to have this beautiful, sweet family, and she was afraid that being a foster parent would destroy that instead of enriching it. And so I always say to people, get clear that that's what you feel called to do. But for people who have prepared properly, there's usually a pretty clear inner sense of, yeah, this is what I need to do. There's a woman, I just interviewed one of my graduates from our academy who this last 2 or 3 years helped found a charter school in her city. And that's something she never thought she would do, and felt so big and overwhelming when she first said yes, but she just felt the importance of it and how much it would bless her community. And in all of these cases, it was fear and a sense of inadequacy that caused these women to pause and not move forward. And for conscientious, good women, often it's that same concern that I'm going to leave my family behind and I'm not going to be there for them. And I always reassure them, like, the fact that you're aware of that and that you're thinking about that means that you won't. And all you have to do is keep checking in with the people in your life. So if someone is listening to this and they're feeling like there's something that would benefit them and benefit others that they really want to engage in, they really want to try it, but they have whatever fears that they have, I would just encourage them to spend some time alone and journal about those fears. Get them out, be very honest with them, and talk yourself through them. Ask yourself why you're afraid of this. What's the worst that could happen? Why are you holding back and hesitating? And then once they've really addressed the fear and looked honestly at it, then to start asking themselves questions about what good could come from it and how they could be blessed and how their family could be blessed and how the people they want to serve could be blessed. And that will start to fuel some positive energy in that direction and help them to start having the courage. But sometimes it's just as simple as just to do the first thing. You know, courage is simply, and we say this all the time, but then it's hard to execute in real time in our real lives. But we all know that courage is simply feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So this is
Indeed.
why it's courageously execute is law number 6. You hear the call and you are courageous. You feel the fear and you do it anyway.
Miss Audrey, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101. Love letters in third season and Movie 101 Review, Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Audrey, if you could hope for readers to finish your book with just one fundamental shift in their perspective or one actionable tool, what would it be?
Um, the shift I hope that will come from reading this book is the knowledge that ordinary people really can do extraordinary things. I read The Hiding Place for the first time, and the Ten Boom family were just so polished, so incredible, such a beautiful family, such beautiful people that I just thought I could never be like them. I could never accomplish the things that they did. And then when I read more,
Miss Audrey is being disconnected, people. So please support Miss Audrey Rindlisbacher. Please read the book itself or buy the book where books are sold. So thank you for listening, and my apology for the technical difficulties that we are encountering right now. So, more to come, people. See you soon.